So.
बात हुई है पापा से अभी वो पेंट वेंट नहीं हो सकता है क्या सही हाँ लो पापा से बात करो
हेलो अगर कॉन्ट्रैक्ट लिखा है अगर कोई से फर्क तो कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता मैंने तो उसको बोला पीछे ले लो हाँ हाँ
Welcome viewers to the inaugural session of our action-oriented Global Tipping Point Summit, scheduled from tomorrow to January 2021. We're delighted to see participants from various parts of India and from other countries as well. The summit has been conceptualized by the dynamic education futurist, TEDx speaker, internationally acclaimed educator and storyteller, Dr. Kuni S. Vivina. In October 2016, Dr. Vivina retired as professor and head of the Department of English, University of Mumbai, India. Dr. Vivina has 2 PhD degrees to her credit, one in literature and the other in education. She has published 11 books and 58 papers in peer-reviewed national and international journals and critical anthologies. She has won numerous national and international awards. In 2013, her book on education, Sourceful Intelligence, was selected as among the 18 best books published in the USA. And her most recent book, What Children Really Want, has received critical acclaim from educators, psychologists, parents, writers from all over the world. In 2015, she was selected by the world leaders in education as among the 35 women from across the world changing educational paradigms. Dr. Vivina has her own storytelling organization called Wordfully Yours, which hosts storytelling programs and conducts training workshops. I now invite Dr. Vivina to say a few words.
Very briefly, I'll try and summarize the concept of the summit in the next few moments. Thank you all for being here. COVID-19 has compelled us to change the way in which we educate our children. But does that necessarily imply a change in consciousness, which educational thinkers have been urging for long? Will it really change our consciousness from a competitive self versus other to a cooperative self and other to an all is self consciousness? Will it help us transition from polarity consciousness of me and mine alone to unity consciousness and a deep sense of oneness? These days, when we talk about change, we are immediately reminded of Gandhiji's words. Be the change you want to see in the world. But the question is all change necessarily positive? Barbara Marx Hubbard, who pioneered the concept of futurism, very, very interestingly observed that people with vision flourish, people without vision perish. However, like change, is vision always positive? The Dalai Lama makes a distinction. He talks about positive vision. And he says that positive action can only follow when there is positive vision. Positive vision needs to be deeply and firmly rooted in compassion, nonviolence, and deep empathy, and of course, wisdom. So how does this really relate to all of us? All of us educators are here for change. The GTPS Summit, the Global Tipping Point Summit, is designed to bring about visible change. But then you may wonder, how can a small person like me really bring about change? Every single person is important. And let me illustrate this through the 100th monkey narrative. This narrative is again rooted in fact. Anthropologists on different islands in Japan were observing monkey behavior. On one island, they noticed that there was a natural little leader whom they called Emo. Every time they gave their sweet potatoes, the little monkeys befriended them. One day, Emo took her sweet potato, washed it in water, and popped it in her mouth and it tasted nicer without the mud and grime. So all her little friends started imitating her, and finally the adults caught on. Interestingly, what happened is that on other islands in Japan, all monkeys started washing their sweet potatoes. We could explain this with Rupert Sheldrake's morphic field theory. Very simply put, if anywhere between 5 to 33% of a species repeat a gesture, it becomes a part of the collective consciousness. Therefore, all of you here are equally important. In order to reach the critical mass and to bring about change, every single one of you is important, whether you are a student or a teacher or a librarian or a counselor or a policymaker. That many people are needed to reach the critical mass, and then change must and will happen. We see how it's happened with the environmental movement, with the climate change movement, with the nuclear disarmament movement, all because the tipping point was reached. So that's the reason for the title, the Global Tipping Point Summit. The summit has been conceptualized differently from other seminars and workshops. The speaker speaks for 20 minutes from tomorrow. The speaker speaks for 20 minutes. At the end of 20 minutes, the speaker names an action project. 4 people who've been liaising with the speaker over several months will then tell the online audience the specific area in which they will provide training. And then we invite you viewers to sign up Google Forms and to jump in and become members of the action group. Members of the action group will receive free training, and then you go out into the world and you implement those changes. This project goes on for 1 year. At the end of the year, this summit is over and we have the next summit. We send the government a white paper informing the government that we're not merely talking about change, but these are the changes that have been implemented and these are the results. So we need all of you, every single one of you, to really take part and make this a movement and help us move from rigid educational systems to dynamic learning ecosystems. Obviously, a summit like this could not have happened with my working alone. 108 people have been working with me. Extremely busy people, neurosurgeons, teachers, professors, all of them have been putting their heart and soul into this entire project. So I need to thank every single person, speaker, change facilitator, and of course the technical and other groups that have been working till now. I'd like to share the screen, so just bear with me for a moment. I'd like to say a genuine thank you to my wonderful advisory board. Just a minute, please. My advisory board comprises luminaries like Dr. Firoza Godrej, Mr. Naushir Kurodi, Mr. Naushir Dadarala, Mr. Sanjay Rastogi, Mr. Yazdi Tantra, Ms. Devika Chatterjee, Ms. Rakhi Chabria, and Ms. Fiona Reynolds. The core committee comprises Mr. Yazdi Tantra, Ms. Deepa Soman, Mr. Milind Soman, Mr. Glenn Concessio, and Mr. Bhavin Shah. Very, very importantly, Ms. Donna Reen, my summit coordinator, has been working with me shoulder to shoulder, tirelessly over months. A very special thank you to you, Donna. We've partnered with Tata Trent, Tantra Tech, K-Merck, Luminaire Business Solutions, Education World, Parents World, Penn Ultimate, Teachers Help Teachers, First Moms Club, and Wolves. We have been extremely fortunate to receive immense support from people like His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Just yesterday, the Dalai Lama's letter came in, and you see it on the screen. The Dalai Lama very, very briefly says in the first paragraph, I am pleased to know about the Global Tipping Point Summit and its focus on improving the present education system so that our younger generation can become more responsible citizens of our planet. We have also received goodwill messages from Lieutenant General Shokin Chauhan, the very renowned psychiatrist, Dr. Kersi Chowda, Shyamak Dava, the internationally renowned choreographer, singer, performer, and artistic director, Shri M, spiritual guide, social reformer, educationist, and Padma Bhushan awardee, Cyrus Brocha, who did a podcast with me, and everyone knows Cyrus. Cyrus, a TV anchor, theater personality, comedian, podcaster, and author, and Mr. Baman Irani, theater and film actor, an artist, and a photographer. So these are some of the people who have been supporting our vision. We thank all of them. And now I would like to invite our very, very special guest today, Dr. Firoza Godrej. Dr. Firoza Godrej is a member of our advisory board, and Dr. Godrej has been supportive of the Global Tipping Point Summit from its inception. So I invite Dr. Godrej to please say a few words. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Dr. Kumi Vevaina, the moment has arrived, something that you have been working for and expressed so passionately and eloquently a few minutes ago. It was a dream and it has become a reality. I do not wish to stand between you and the speakers for tonight, and I'm looking forward to the deliberations. But I speak here in my token capacity as a member of your advisory group. I am really, really delighted that this Global Tipping Point Summit in Education, which has been a long time in coming, is a reality here today. The inaugural session is being held by none other than our young, dynamic friend, Shaheen Mistri, the founder of Akanksha and Teach for India. Shaheen, I'm looking forward to your inaugural address. I'm sure we have a lot to learn, yet to learn from what you have to say. And I'm looking forward to hearing Kiran Bir Sethi, and with who else? With another old friend, Bachi Karkaria. Thank you very, very much for being here on this opening afternoon. I have been in education, and that's what brought me in touch with Dr. Kumi Vevaina at the Bombay University many, many years ago. And although we were talking with postgraduate and undergraduate students at that time, both Kumi and I felt that we have to go even further back. We really have to start with primary education, and where children are being initiated, introduced to learning, whether it's formal or informal learning. I'm a firm believer that education is not about loading the child's mind with information, what we in India call rote learning. It has its necessities up to a certain point, but it doesn't help you any further than just memorizing a lot of facts and just forgetting about the application point of view. So education should make us capable of having a razor sharp perception, capable of knowing life in its full depth and dimensions. It's 10 years since the right to education policy was implemented, brought in 2009 by the government of India. And today the new education policy has been implemented. The right to education for each child has been implemented. Where are we going from here? And I'm talking about the worst sufferers of the education system is the dropouts. Why are we letting these bright children slip through our fingers? They have to be caught, nurtured, and brought back into the system. I was given a few minutes. I hope I haven't exceeded my time. Good luck, all of you. Shaheen, Komal, Bachi, I'm looking forward to hearing you today. and all the speakers over the next 3 days. And do join us parents in January for the Global Tipping Point Summit for Parental Education. Thank you very much, and back to you, Dr. Kumi.
Thank you, Dr. Godrej. That was really lovely. And Dr. Godrej has been, as I said, a very, very major supporter. I just went in with a dream, and it is she, among the others on the advisory board, who helped us make it real. Thank you, Dr. Godrej. Thank you very much. Over to you, Nina.
Thank you, ma'am. We would now like to welcome Ms. Kiran Bir Sethi and Ms. Bachi Karkaria. Kiran Bir Sethi is a designer who became a teacher, a principal, who grew into an education reformer and subsequently morphed into a social entrepreneur. A trained graphic designer, she comfortably uses the language of design, iteration, prototype, design specs to develop not only curriculum innovation, but also community-based social programs. After graduating from the National Institute of Design, Ahmedabad, India, in 1989, Kiran successfully ran her own graphic design firm for over a decade. She moved into education when she founded the Riverside School in Ahmedabad, India, in 2001, which is now viewed as a laboratory to prototype design processes that enables transformative student learning experiences. Kiran is also the founder of Approach, an initiative to make our cities more child-friendly, for which she was awarded the Ashoka Fellow in 2008. In 2009, she received the Call to Conscience Award by the King Center at Stanford. In 2009, Kiran launched Design for Change, which uses a simple four-step design framework, FIDS, that is, feel, imagine, do, share, to cultivate the I can mindset in all children. Today, TFC is the world's largest movement of change of and by children and is in 60 plus countries, impacting over 2.2 million children and 65,000 teachers. Over the years, Kiran's Riverside and Design for Change have won several accolades and awards. Kiran currently resides in Ahmedabad with her husband, Sethi, and two wonderful children, their son Rag and daughter Jazz. She loves listening to music, watching movies, singing, dancing, and has an insane love for fruit-filled dark chocolates. Welcome, Ms. Kiran. Bachi Karkaria is a senior third-generation Indian journalist, columnist, and an international media trainer. She has served as an editor at the Times of India Group and helped create successful new media brands there. She writes three popular columns: the satirical Erratica in the Times of India, a relationship advice one, Giving Gyan in Mumbai Mirror, and Mapping Metamorphosis in Tales from TJ Road in the online First Post. Her professional specializations are urban change, public health, and gender. Her several books include the best-selling In Hot Blood, The Nanavati Case That Shook India, and Dare to Dream, A Life of M.S. Oberoi. Welcome, Ms. Karkaria. Over to you to kindly lead the discussion with Ms. Sethi. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And congratulations, Kumi, for getting this off the ground. So I will jump into this straight away. Kiran, yes, jump.
Yes.
Kiran, an iconic professor at the Columbia School of Journalism said there were only two kinds of news stories: the R story and the O story. R, the wonder of it, and O, the tragedy of it. So, in your experience in education, what would be the equivalence?
Bachi, for me, the aha and the oho is basically what drives any kind of inflection point. And I think for me, starting the Riverside School was quite the aha and the oho, because the day I was going to start, that was 26th of Jan 2001, the biggest earthquake hit. I mean, it can't get more than that, right?
Right.
But I think the moving, I mean, I continued to, of course, and start the school in the June of 2001, and everything since then has been aha. The idea that if an earthquake can't bring you down, nothing else can.
Right.
So I guess the journeys will always be up and down, but I believe uh, the thing that constantly drives me is this understanding of today, that eventually all your intention in the world is never going to change the world, right? And as Kumi said, that putting it into action and then having the stamina to stay with the idea long enough, that's my biggest aha and the oho. So whilst ideas are great, I don't think ideas change the world alone. So you need to kind of follow it up with, the sleepless nights and the long, conversations and if you can go through that, every day has an aha and an oh.
Right. It's the old percentage of inspiration and perspiration.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Now you started in design. Where did and how did it segue into education? To a lay person, I mean, you can think of designing curricula, but that's about all that I can think of.
Well, I mean, I swear, I had no intentions of, I mean, in the introduction, people keep saying, oh, changing the world or having these ideas. I was completely happy running my design firm, designing restaurants and, corporate identity and living a life of leisure. And then I became a mother and my whole world changed. And I think for me, looking at the crisis of my son's education offered an opportunity. And I think as design and designers always start with questioning the status quo and saying, what if and why not? And for me, as a mother, I reacted to what I experienced my son going through, which was an education that rewarded compliance over conversation. And for me, that was not good enough. And so the opportunity as a designer, I responded to say, there has to be a better way. And if nobody else is doing it, well, as Gandhiji said, you are who you've been waiting for. The world is not going to come and change your life.
Right.
So I think for me as a designer, starting small, I had no intention of changing education. It was really my child's life. And then as we grew, putting the design thinking mindset of always getting the user into the conversation pretty much set us on the path.
So very briefly, I want you to answer this one in between question that I have here, that you really did start with what is called homeschooling. So can you give us all the alerts, the warning signals, because I can't remember who it was, some really big name who turned out to be a product of homeschooling. And then everyone in my building, our WhatsApp group was full of chatter. Oh, should we start schooling our children at home?
Well, yes. I mean, I did start with homeschooling, but that was a very brief moment. I mean, around 3 to 6 months. I'm a fan of collaboration. I'm a fan of that messiness that comes with, listening to each other and changing the way you think. And that doesn't happen by yourself. I keep saying you can learn about things by yourself, but to learn about yourself, you need others. It takes a village, right? And I think whilst there's so much opportunity now with what COVID has shown us about learning things, about things, and I say go for that. I think that's fantastic. Keep your pace, but you really learn about yourself and each other and the greater good only when you collaborate and you co-construct and you kind of slow down, and then you kind of say that. So I would say if you can manage both, I don't think it's an either or. So then I would say schools will have a role to play.
Okay, I'm particularly interested in your child-friendly cities, because personally too, like professionally, I've been trying very, very hard to get a user-friendly city. So just tell me exactly, and you've got a nice name for it, approach, which is spelled A capital P R O C capital H, which is, you say,
Well, it really is a protagonist in every child.
So what
Right?
exactly does
Yeah.
that imply?
Well, approach actually started as a response from my children. My first batch was in grade 7 that year. And I was talking about childhood. And we were talking about childhood. And I was telling them about all the wonderful things I used to play on the streets of my city, Bangalore, when I was young. And we really didn't have these clubs and all of these things. And I was asking them, and the conversation was, what do you do when you go home? And they said, no, we are not allowed to go out. The city is not safe. And that kind of was, again, the crisis of a child not feeling safe in the city became an opportunity. And again, as a design mindset, we said, it's really about a symbol of love. If city is designed for their child, the child eventually will take care of the city. It's a very simple circle of, of impact. So I think the idea that if our cities are not seen as safe and not seen as places that care for children, that needs to change. And I think as a metaphor, we chose to close down the busiest street for traffic. Imagine if you take, I don't know, Marine Drive or whatever, the equivalent of that in Ahmedabad is the Law Garden Street, right?
Right.
And as a metaphor, and then as an action, the municipality and the police worked with the children at Riverside and eventually NID and IAM to basically close it down for traffic and make it a landscape and a playground for children. Now that is a great symbol for its child, right? And I think for us, then subsequently, of course, we told the city, open your hearts and your doors to children. So from the multiplexes to the parks to organizations, we pretty much said, let the city become the playground for the child. So that really was what approach started in 2007. And we're still doing that 13 years down.
But so how often does this happen?
Well, 5 times in a year, we close down street. It's called Street Smart. And the rest of it, of course, the parks every Sunday, the movie theaters once a month.
Okay.
And it's kind of growing. It's now gone to other cities. It's gone across the world. It's completely open source.
Right.
Pretty much everything is on the website.
Well, actually, Times of India has, for such a materialistic organization, it has actually created this thing called Happy Streets. And on the winters, yes, you want to say something?
I have to say that in Ahmedabad, we did it before.
I'm sure that's exactly what I'm telling you, that you did set the pace for that. All right. So did you kind of really put down a manifesto for this or?
No, you see, the UNICEF has a manifesto, right? UNICEF has a manifesto. It basically is about lack of exploitation, safe transport, street lights, all of that. That pretty much exists as the manifesto for this thing. For that, it was just simply love. Right. It was an expression of love. It was an expression of a city that cares. And so it wasn't all the infrastructure capacity. It was really just opening hearts and doors, much simpler.
Correct. Okay. I want to now ask you about this particular year, this dystopian year that we've gone through, 2020. Ironic date, considering that 2020 is the metaphor for perfection.
Okay.
And this year has been anything but.
But
what has been its impact on children? The isolation, the fear, the entire, upside down, the alternative reality that they are being forced into. What is it doing to kids?
Well, I think what 2020 did was, pardon the use of the word, but unmasked an already dysfunctional education system, right? We knew it was not working. And unfortunately, whilst there would have been a pace of I would say, progress, 2020 put everything together at the same time, at the same place. Whether it's inequity,
it was
the earthquake, right? So in a way, we didn't have time. We would have said, infrastructurally or technology would have reached the last child maybe in 5 years, or it would have talked about inequity in terms of access. But 2020 kind of just took it all up and said, boss, here it is. It's all here in your face. So what are we going to do about it? So I think that was one thing that it kind of unmasked, and it asked us to do many things, and it kind of put it right up and personal. I think the second thing that it did was quite interestingly, quite the different. It kind of showcased the teachers and the way they are in such wonderful light, because for the first time, the teaching profession was literally seen as first, the essential workers. Teachers took up the challenge. They were right up there, despite, I have to say, some really difficult times that they faced becoming the families. But it really gave the respect that this profession deserves. That was the second with the teachers. But for children, I have to say that they learn by seeing what is happening, right? That's the whole thing with younger children. Baby see, baby do. And what have they been witnessing? Fear, anxiety, uncertainty, whether it was in their homes or with our wonderful television channels blaring it into their rooms every single day. That conversation, for the first time, they're being told, if you love somebody, stay away from them. I mean, it's completely different, right? And children learn with not only their body, but seeing the cues of the face. And they've been devoid all of those cues for learning. So I think for us, whilst we will, of course, emerge from this, I feel it's also highlighted the need for social emotional well-being over everything else. I think the confidence has now come that, okay, thoda math science kar lete hain. I don't think that's really the gap that one has to of course, address, but not be so worried about right now in the immediate. I think we will really need to go back to the hearts of our children and to the ability to help them feel strong and courageous again. So I think the greatest curriculum we will have going forward is converting fear into courage. I think that will be something we will need to do.
You're very optimistic about this, but I think, it's sort of thrown up huge challenges for anyone with children, dealing with children. This whole business of anxiety and psychosis and the kind of mental health problems and something as basic as the tools, like that child Aishwarya Reddy, who committed suicide because she couldn't afford.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, I know my part-time help. She's got one phone for 2 of her kids, and the third child is falling through that crack because she can't. I mean, of course, we're working at giving that to her. But the point is, these are first-generation learners. So this whole digital, I mean, this has been a year of living digitally, but the digital divide has never been more stark than today. So, I mean, what in your experience can you say can be done about this?
I think the infrastructure part will have to be seriously looked at. I've seen some programs go really bad. There was this, one laptop per child that was kind of launched a couple of years ago, and it fell flat on the face because whilst the laptop was there, it was not backed by support or the network, etc. So yes, I think we will have to do a massive infrastructural capacity building of any nation, and that will take its own time, etc. So having said that, I think wherever possible, whatever we can do to ensure that children feel safe again. I have to tell you very simply, nothing can replace the mental safety children feel to learn, because that is at risk. Because now online, there are no guardrails online. At least when they're at school, you have certain checks and measures about safety, right? You can still see whether the child is there or not there. Online, it is free for all.
Right.
And that is going to be, so whilst we will put that laptop or that phone as a smartphone in their hands, who is looking at the guardrails online? So online safety will become, if not more, the most urgent need as policy, as nation. So we will still do a better job of the math and the science, and we will probably put that laptop in your hand. But after a point, where are those guardrails online?
Exactly. Okay.
That's going to be the big challenge.
That's a very important point. How much more time do we have? Can we have one more question?
Sure. Absolutely.
Sure. Why not?
All right.
Such an interesting conversation.
Imagine, do share, right?
Yes.
I mean, from your experience, really, where did these 4 pillars arise?
Well, it is a demystification of the design thinking process that I have learned and been educated with. The idea of how empathy always starts innovation, right? You can't have, let's be different, because a lot of product design or design often says, how are we different? But I think real design starts by asking, how do you make a difference? And in that nuance lies the steps. So whilst so much of the work in schools used to be project-based learning, the do, right? They were doing. And I have often walked into schools and spoken to kids and say, what are you doing? And they will say, we are doing this project. And I will say, what's it for? They will say, I don't know, teacher told me. So that feel and imagine gave the ownership back to the child. So that I can do this, or I am, came from the understanding of what bothers the children. So that's the empathy. How do you imagine change? And then how do you put it into action, the do? And then the shared, of course, I keep saying is my favorite word, is to, with abundance, share the story. So you inspire other children to say, I can do that too. Right? So so the role models started becoming the children themselves.
Okay.
And I think for me, FIDS for kids is really the vaccine that we need for the heart.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of this, FIDS for kids. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. FIDS for kids.
All right. Okay. And okay, one last question. That in all these years, really what's your, okay, two questions. In all these years, really, what has been your learning about children, about this, and really your biggest challenge?
Well, I think I've learned, and this came really from my own experience because I did not come from education. So it was super exciting for me to learn from the children. So I think the one simple, and I've seen this now in the 20 years, I've seen it universally because I've had the huge opportunity to travel. I think that there are three filters that we must remove when we look at children. The filter of age, the filter of gender, and the filter of demographics. Universally, of course, or everything else are the other, like caste, creed, all of those. But universally, unfortunately, we've done a great disservice to children when we think of them as age. Chota hai, ek ABCD karna hai, kya badi baat hai? Okay, bada hoke kaam karega. That has been the greatest lie we have been giving our children. That you're not capable today when you grow up. So then, so that's one. Gender. I've seen this across the world, of course, more in certain places culturally, girl and boy. And then we kind of diminish again their capacity and competency by looking at gender. And the third, of course, is demographics. Where you come from will determine where you go, which is so not true. Right? And so therefore we get a scarcity mentality. We say, oh, you're coming from this, so then this much is good enough. So this idea of patronizing and putting a filter when we look at our children through age, that age seriously has nothing to do with competency. We know that. So that's the biggest learning I have learned over time. Of course, other insights are later, but that's universal. And I think the second challenge when you ask, I think it continues to be that we know all of this wonderful insights. We have to action it every single day. So you have to put that into daily practice, not, once a month, I'll be a kick-ass teacher, be fantastic, or during this time. But I think for me to continue to put that common sense that we all know to be true into common practice on a daily basis is a great challenge worth, kind of overcoming every day.
Okay. And I'm going to squeeze in one more question. That is that
you will just throw us out.
I saw that long list of your awards and things that you got. What is really, I don't want you to embarrass anyone in this, but really which one has meant the most to you? Or what has helped you make the most difference?
Oh, that's a nicer way to look at it, because I think I keep saying awards just open up more doors. If it ever does anything, it kind of just says, okay, can we open up more doors? I would not say awards, but I would say the opportunity of TED, speaking at TED. It just put the work we do on a completely different orbit, and it made us go global. So I am eternally grateful for that opportunity when I spoke at TED.
Okay. All right. Okay, so I'm going to end now. And Ahmedabad, where you now are, it's known as the experimental theater of Hindutva. It used to be my town-in-law, and I then discovered that it was also the experimental theater of food, because they have no inhibitions about what they pair with what. Tomato soup with save sprinkled on it.
And Chinese dosa. You have to eat Chinese dosa.
The law gardens that you spoke about, And but I think I want to end by saying that that Kiran has really made Ahmedabad, the experimental theater of education. I don't even know if I want to put such a formal word to it. So thank you very much for what you've done. And it's been a pleasure speaking to you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Over.
We'd be really happy to take questions. I think everyone has been so enraptured by what you had to say that there aren't that many questions. I think it's extremely important. Two things that you said to me personally are very, very important. Collaboration and a can-do mindset. We're constantly talking about our challenges, but even the COVID crisis for that matter, every crisis is an opportunity to change. And as you very rightly said, COVID has put us in a fix. Our education system, like many of the social systems, was crumbling. The edifice was crumbling. And yet we were trying to say, oh, I have something new. Let's see this. Let's try out this. But it said, no, none of this is working. So it's forced us into rethinking education. And I seriously feel that at a time like this, all of us need to come together, because you are doing some amazing things. People in the Krishnamurti school, in the Waldorf-Steiner schools, and the Montessori schools are doing amazing things. If we could all put our heads together and work for the children and think like children, because I was one hell of a bored child. So if we could really get together and collaborate on this, we would be able to bring about, I think, visible change.
That 33%. We'll all be monkeys.
That's all we need. We don't need 50%. We just need 33%.
33%. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kumi.
Devika, are there any questions? Devika is the director, principal of JBCN International School, and she's here with us. Do we have any questions from YouTube, Devika?
Yes, we have Kumi.
Yes, go ahead.
I'll just read it out. How do we implement the philosophy of feel, imagine, do, share across disciplines, particularly for older children?
Oh.
I know there is an answer on the chat box, but we would like to hear from you, please, Mrs. Sethi, if you could.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think it is not. It is not defined or limited to age. FIDS really is, I would say, like a way of life. Start always with empathy. So when you are speaking to children, no matter what age they are, just listen to them. I think the biggest disservice we do is tell them and instruct them, and all because we love them. No. Please listen. So I think to start with listening and trusting. So whatever it is that bothers children, I've had children say, my school bag is heavy, or nobody sits with me when I'm sitting for snack in the group, or I have no friends in the playground. You must listen. Otherwise, invariably, we tell our children, oh, that's not good enough. That's not big enough. Are global warming karo. So we give them these big visions of our adult way to look at world. So I would say if you just start by listening to children, that's the feel. Work with simple things like brainstorming for the imagine, and then give them the time to do it. Don't hijack that by saying, okay, you go to class, I will do that call. Or you go to class, I'll finish that. So I think we don't let them go the last mile. And that last mile is often where they will learn the biggest lessons of rejection, of time wasting, of nobody likes me anymore, but I have to do it, of resilience. We must give them that time to even iterate. That's really the greatest, challenge again in most schools. They'll say, oh, time, where's time? Let them do it on Saturday. Let them do in sports period. Shut up, poor children. Half the time they're sitting at home for sports period. So I think it's giving equal importance and weightage to the idea of self and, of the ability to agency. So that's really, so like I said, even parents, even all of us, even governments should do FIDS. I think we will be in a better place.
There is a question which is related to the same one. If I may just read that out. How do you incorporate this in a regular curriculum bound by syllabi and examinations?
Okay. Yeah, well, I will just tell you.
Practical problem in many schools, yes.
Yeah. But having said that, and I have to say, I've done a big study of all your boards, CBSE board and all of those boards. Every board, by the way, has set aside time for, they would either call it values education or moral education or citizenship education. We basically told schools, give us that time. Most schools don't know what to do in that time, right? And invariably it becomes catch up on homework time. So I know I've heard one child say it is SUPW was not socially useful productive word, some useful periods wasted or something. That's the acronym. So if children are looking at that as if it's wasted time and it's not meaningful, I would suggest give us that time to start with. The beauty with FIDS is it's so versatile, it can fit into your existing curriculum. Braver schools have said, okay, I'll give an entire week, maybe the EVS classes, 1 hour every day. So again, we have as many strategies. I would just say try it. Great day to start off is, of course, on Gandhiji's birthday, or great day to end it is on Gandhiji's birthday. He will be a happy man if our children are changing the world and not just taking a holiday.
Absolutely.
That is just wonderful.
And that doesn't mean putting them in a classroom and making them write an essay or have a great national integration.
Absolutely. I think
Okay.
there are many more questions, but we need to get on with the program. So you've been absolutely wonderful. I knew you would be. I think I met you 12 years ago.
Yes.
And we really vibed, and it's the same spirit even today.
No,
So thank you very, very much, Kiran. Thank you
Bachi.
very much, Bachi. It's been an awesome, awesome interview. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
And over to you, Nina.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Ms. Kiran and Ms. Bachi, for a truly delightful and engaging exchange. I would now like to invite our esteemed advisory board member, Mr. Kurodi, to speak a few words.
Good evening, Mr. Kurodi. Like Ms. Firoza Godrej, Mr. Kurodi has supported the vision for over 2 years and kept on encouraging and advising. So his role has been extremely instrumental as well. We're deeply obliged to Mr. Kurodi. He was the ex-managing director of Volta and now is a consultant and helps numerous companies even today. Is the microphone on?
No.
Yes, we can hear you.
We
can hear you, Mr. Kurodi.
Naushad, well, my name is Naushad. Nobody calls me Mr. K. And it's a great honor to be amongst you. I'll be brief, as those of you who know me know that I hardly speak for a minute or two. So may this summit teach each one of us to help others. There's too little of that, irrespective of color, caste, religion, or creed. And may this summit be the groundwork that builds a path to the spirit of global cooperation and trust so badly needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kurodi. Though brief, every word has been meaningful. That is the way you've been advising me. Few words, but extremely powerful in themselves. Thank you very much. Over to you, Nina.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thanks.
We now welcome Ms. Shaheen Mistri. Ms. Shaheen Mistri, CEO, Teach for India, grew up in 5 countries around the world and returned to India when she was 18 to start Akanksha. For 17 years, she worked with teachers and students, building Akanksha to provide children from low-income communities the kind of education that would maximize their greatest potential. Today, Akanksha serves 9,300 children through their school project and after-school centers in Mumbai and Pune. In 2008, Shaheen founded Teach for India with an audacious vision of providing an excellent education to all children across India through building a pipeline of leaders committed to ending educational inequity in India. Today, Teach for India directly impacts approximately 32,000 children across 7 regions in India. Shaheen has also created projects like the Maya musical, the Kids Education Revolution, which explore student leadership, creating platforms for student voice and partnership for TFIX, which is a year-long incubator program for passionate entrepreneurs who are willing to adapt Teach for India's model to their context and region in rural areas. Shaheen serves on the boards of Akanksha Foundation and Simple Education Foundation. Shaheen has been an Ashoka Fellow, a global leader for tomorrow at the World Economic Forum, and an Asia Society 21 leader. She is the author of the book Redrawing India and the Miss Mugli's children's books. She has a bachelor's degree from St. Xavier's College, Mumbai, and a master's degree from the University of Manchester. Over to you, Ms. Shaheen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nina, for that kind introduction. Just give me a second. I'm going to share my screen. I hope you guys can see my screen. Yes. So it's a great pleasure to be here and a great privilege to follow my very dear friend Kiran. I've heard her speak 1,000 times, and each time I leave with a little bit more conviction and a little bit more energy. And then to hear Noshir after a long time as well. And as you said, I think each of those words was very powerful. My hope actually is that I'm able to answer a little bit of the conversation that started at the end of Kiran's presentation. While in our hearts, we know that something like FIDS and changing the world needs to be a part of education, why don't we do it? What are the constraints? How does it fit with the syllabus? How do we prioritize it? I think a lot about those issues. And so hopefully my remarks will take that conversation a little bit forward as well. I'm calling this the greatest time to matter. And when I say that, I speak to each of you on this call. I think this is the greatest time to matter. And so what I'm going to do is read you a little bit of a conversation that I loved. So this is Kriplani, who's talking to Gandhiji and says, Mr. Gandhi, you know nothing at all about history. Never has a nation been able to free itself without violence. And so our dear Gandhi replies, smiling gently as he does, you know nothing about history, he corrected gently. The first thing you have to learn about history is that because something has not taken place in the past, that does not mean it cannot take place in the future. And so I think a lot about that with education. We're very set in our ways in education. Things have been like this for a very long time. And yet this quote provokes me to say, but that does not mean it cannot be different in the future. This is sort of the question I wanted to start with, and I want us to do a little bit of an exercise, if you'll entertain me and put your chat box on while we do this. I'm going to show you a series of pictures, and either in your mind or on the chat box, if you recognize this person, just write yes. or in your head, tell yourself yes. And if you don't recognize this person, say no. Okay, and I'm going to go a little bit quickly. And we're really answering this question. Who are the people across history we remember as having mattered? So here's the first one in your mind. Yes or no? I recognize, I don't recognize. Here's the second one. I recognize, I don't recognize. Yeah, and you can nod for me as well. Recognize, don't recognize. 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 Interestingly, like I've done this activity with just people everywhere, including in seminars with deans of business schools that really think very critically about the kinds of leaders they want to create in their schools. And most always, the people who were leading corporate leaders internationally, here are some of the companies of the people you saw, we were not able to recognize. And yet, the people who drove significant social change in the world, well, those people unquestionably, irrespective of age, as Kiran pointed out, we are able to recognize. And yet it's so interesting. What we value in schools is the competition, the getting ahead, the standing first, the pulling others down on the way, the making a lot of money, becoming that big corporate leader. And yet the people we remember over history are these people. If you add to that the headlines that we wake up to today, headlines of racism, of the pandemic, of violence, of oppression, you realize that the greatest thing we can do to matter is actually build an education system that builds those leaders, leaders committed to changing the world. And so when we ask Kiran, how do we do it? How do we fit it in? Is it even the right question? Like, what is going to happen to our nation and our world if we are not cultivating leaders to do what actually Naushir said in the first line that he shared, leaders committed to helping others, to making the world better? And that really starts with education. So I'm going to show you a short video clip. The first time I saw this clip, I've seen it about 100 times, I started weeping, not because this is a cute child from a Delhi government school who's in a Teach for India classroom, but because I looked at her, her name is Kusum, and I said, that's the kind of leader that can change the world one day. That's the kind of leader. So this is Kusum, grade 6 Delhi government school. And this video is very candidly shot a year and a half after we started working with Kusum.
What I think an excellent education is that not only studying and being good in all subjects and good getting full marks and all that. For me, an excellent education is getting full marks in your values and inside your heart what type of person you are. I have improved a lot in last 2 years because in the class I get angry a lot of time and I start being angry and shouting on everyone. But now I have improved a lot. You know, I have more courage than before because I was very scared from everything near people around me, and whenever I'm talking to someone, I was very shy to talk to someone. But now I'm very courage because in last 2 years I learned how to be courage from Maya. The vision for our community is one day everyone will get an excellent education. So it is talking about everyone. That means each child will get an excellent education, not only one person. So that's why we all should work together and think about the vision. And I think my first step is thinking only about the vision. And then second step, thinking about the community. And the third step will be thinking a vision up for the community. So I'm not going to do that alone. I need everyone's help. If I will make a vision alone, then that means I'm not making for my community. If I have a vision for my community, we all have to work together and then work on that vision. I think this is important because everyone have vision for each other. If it is for community, then it should be everyone. Because if I will say my vision for community is this, so I want to do this. Do you think alone you will do some? Can you do something? No. So if we will work together and do teamwork, okay. Let's take example. To make a house, does only one person is building that house? No, because everyone is working together to build that house. So same way, to build a vision, we not only need one person and one person only can't do it. We all need to work together and then the vision will be completely finished very early. If you find out any child near you who is not able to get a good education, please help that child also. Because if you will help that child, then his future and your country's future will be better than now. How is your country's future? So please help that person, because I don't only want in my country everyone should get excellent education. But in each country there should be an excellent education, and that country should go ahead and so be proud on their futures, their future and their children around.
So I'm not sure what each one of you is taking away from that video, but when I look at that and I see this 10-year-old's ability to look at self and be self-aware, her ability to understand the power of working with people and for people, her commitment to driving change. And I think going back to Kiran again, if our children were to practice the feel, imagine, do, share, FIDS process again and again through their school life, there is no problem that they would not be able to face. And what I've learned counterintuitively is when you're in service as a student of something greater than yourself, your own learning accelerates just dramatically. And so I wanted to show you that, to show you that in 1 3-minute video, that's my vision for education, that children should be able to be grounded in self, in other, and in making the world better. The big question is how. And so I'm going to just share this. This is when I came back and started my work and I was 18. I walked into a community in Mumbai and I luckily had a camera that day. And this is the first child. She really started my journey in education. Her name is Pinky. And I lost track of her years ago, but I have never let go of this photograph, because when I started and today, the one thing that's kept me going is looking in children's eyes and seeing that limitless potential, and then knowing that for most of them, that potential will not be realized. And so what have I sort of learned from that first day when I started my work now 30 years ago, today, as I'm trying to build a movement of leaders committed to that same work? I'm going to just try and share a little bit of that. And it's hard to pull the essence of 30 years into just 3 or 4 slides, but that's what I'm going to attempt to do. And some of these themes, I think, follow very seamlessly from what you heard Kiran share as well. A lot of my work has been deeply influenced by her work. So the first is really asking ourselves, like, do we have the purpose of education right? Why has education become only about marks for exams for livelihood? While that matters, and you see Teach for India's vision for our kids at the bottom of the slide, free of poverty really matters. We can't be living in a world where children are struggling. and yet filled with love also matters. And why love? Because if you love yourself, if you love your work, if you love the people you work with, well, then you do pretty much what it takes to get to where you do. Really thinking about whether we have the purpose of education right. I often think if school leaders at the beginning of the year answered this question differently, their actions would follow very differently. The second question that I ask myself a lot, and especially in this time of the pandemic, are our students and teachers well? If you are well, if you are joyful, if you are happy, then you are learning at a completely different level. And so we think a lot in our work about what does it mean to create a safe space, not just a space where I can raise my voice and I can be myself, but I can hold a differing person. I can value someone who looks very different from me and sounds very different and has very different opinions. And are our schools just holding spaces for dialogue, for children to be able to stand up and really be different? The third, and this builds a little bit on the work that Kiran does with 21st century skills as well. We've given a lot of thought and done a lot of research on like, what are those skills that we need to be building in children? And right now, as we're in the pandemic again, where this is reaffirmed that it is children who have the courage to stay positive, kids who are self-aware, kids that can collaborate and reach out to others, kids that are finding what they need, asking the questions, researching. We call these at Teach for India 8 C's. And these 8 C's are what all of us work on. So they're what we build in our students, but they're also what we build in ourselves. So really thinking about the skills that our kids need. And as you can probably imagine, growth in the C's is leading to academic growth. And that cycle is very beautiful to see. I don't know if Kiran mentioned it in her talk, but Riverside School, despite spending so much time focusing kids on changing the world, consistently scores in the top 10 academically year after year in EI assessment. And so the two are very linked, and it's important to remember that. And this is sort of the concept that keeps me awake at night. Are we actually sharing power with our students? It's interesting. I go to education conference after education conference, and the first thing I look for is children, because like this is about children, like they have the greatest stakes. And yet I look around the room and I see Zoom calls and it's all adults talking about what's right for children. If we change that, as Kiran shared, if we listen to our children, if we ask them, well, why do you want to be educated? What does education mean? How do you want to learn? And if we actually give them power, I think it's our only hope of educating India. And what does this look like? It looks like changing classrooms from a teacher is responsible for the learning of her 30 kids to we are 31 learners, each teaching somebody else something, right to at the level of policy. When the new educational policy is formulated, there are equal numbers of students at the table forming that policy. At every level of the system, can we bring kids literally and figuratively to the table? How do these principles sort of come together? A quick example. This is 12-year-old Rehan. He's from Ahmedabad. He lives in one of Ahmedabad's most difficult communities. If you see the image on the left, it's a deceptive image. It looks like there are mountains in the background. Actually, those are 8 mountains of garbage. And Rehan lives in the middle of that. But when he was 10, 2 years ago, he started his journey of change. He said, I'm going to clean up my community. 8 mountains of garbage. And so the first thing he did was he scaled that mountain. He collected samples of how toxic the waste was. He sent it to the media. He wrote about it. He started all kinds of things in his community. He actually has got a women's empowerment program going. He runs 20 community centers, each one facilitated by a student between the ages of 10 to 12. Those spaces are safe. They give kids power. They drive change, and they're actually working. If you see this last image, he's actually lobbied the government to start collecting the garbage. And the image you see on the top right is they're actually starting to clear one of those mountains of garbage. That's the power. He's actually founded his own organization already. It's called Pencil Bricks. And Rehan is one of the best networkers you'll ever meet. He's a bundle of energy and positivity, and his goal is to clean up the world. That's his goal. And so bringing this sort of to a close, I think about all of those ideas, and then I think about the pandemic. And a dear friend of mine showed me this image, and he said the pandemic has been a little bit like being in a very dark tunnel, unclear, difficult for so many of us in so many different ways. And yet the real question is, can we see the light at the end of that tunnel? And to us, we're seeing blended learning as that light. And I just want to end by talking a little bit about that. The idea that we can use technology, not standalone as virtual classes, but in and beyond classrooms on a permanent basis, not just right now, to keep learning going, I think can be an absolute game changer. And I think it's the biggest opportunity in education that the pandemic has given us, because when you work, especially as I do, with children who have the least resources and opportunities, suddenly the digital world is an equalizer. I can learn from anybody in the world now, not just the teacher who happens to be in front of me. I can learn at any time of the day now, not just in the 3.5 hours of instructional time that I get in a government school. And so suddenly, if I'm a motivated student, I can become and learn anything that I want in the whole world. And so what we've been doing at Teach for India we've been on a relentless drive to raise the funds for hardware to put devices in the hands of our students. In the short term, their learning continues, but so that in the medium and long term, we can actually change and reimagine what education actually looks like. I wanted to just end with this sort of message as I see the importance of education and the importance and just how vast and difficult it is to educate every child with the kind of education that we've been talking about. This idea of like doing whatever it takes, like how do all of us do it? So if we have the questions, find the answers, but not stop until we're delivering an education that isn't just about marks and exams, but about unleashing a child's greatest potential. How do we do whatever it takes? And how do we remember that we do whatever it takes? Because when we look at a Kusum or the equivalent child in your school or your life, we know that with the right opportunities and inputs and mindsets that Kusum could become the next Gandhiji or the next Mother Teresa. And we don't need outlier Mother Teresas and Gandhijis anymore. We need everybody to grow up a change maker. And so I'll just stop sharing with that and say a big thank you to all of you for listening.
Thank you, Shaheen. That was an extremely interesting presentation. Shaheen is extraordinarily busy, and I am deeply grateful to you. We are honored that you accepted the invitation to talk at the Global Tipping Point Summit. And every word you've said is aligned to our vision. Shaheen stepped in a little late because she was at another call. But Shaheen, your vision and our vision is completely aligned. So one of the things that I have been also saying is that we need to get young people into the movement. Bittu Saigal has done such amazing work with his Bal Sena and the entire Tiger Project. You involve students. So what we did in October last month, we invited students across the boards, across the regional boundaries, and we got them to talk about the kind of changes that they would like to see in the parenting situation and in education. They came up with such awesome ideas, which we've shared with the speakers, because I think if the global, the climate movement has succeeded today, it's because globally there are youth leaders. So all the time we keep saying we're doing this for children, but as you and Kiran both said, are we really listening to children? So that is the kind of opportunity we gave them last time. And the students were extremely articulate and they came up with both thoughtful and thought-provoking ideas. So absolutely with you. Every single point that you've made has been extremely valuable. And let's see what kind of questions have come in from the audience. Would you be happy to take a few questions?
Absolutely. Kumi, thank you so much. Thanks for your words and for all the love that you put into bringing all of us together. I think it was really lovely to see that.
Thank you. And as I was telling Kiran too, we do need to work collaboratively. You have something which is invaluable. I have something probably. So let's just sit down and share rather than creating ghettos or silos and saying, this is my methodology, this is your methodology. Let's just hold hands because kids will learn from us. And that's the only way to create a better world. As your girl talked so eloquently about collaboration, it touched my heart. So, Devika, do we have questions from you too?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And I'm waiting to ask one of those questions. I am going to pose this question to Mrs. Shaheen Mistri, please. Why do our grade cards not reflect the 20th century skills learned by to be learned by 21st century citizens, the children of tomorrow? So I'll just repeat that question. Why do our grade cards not reflect the 21st century skills which have to be learned by our 21st century citizens, our children?
You know, I mean, that question is just spot on. Why? I don't know. I think because it's not what society values today. We have to change what society values. Society values the ability to go out, get a job that makes a lot of money. And the way to get there currently is to get into a competitive college, and that requires grades, right? And academics. I think what we need to show, and interestingly, the research more and more is showing that what kids need to be successful is not just academics. Like, we may feel good about ourselves at the end of the year, but 15 years from now, when we see where those kids are, they are not going to be successful in the 21st century. So I think the work, Devika, is to change the outcome. And I would say, like, anyone here who has the ability to do that, even at the level of a school, we need more and more examples. If you go to Riverside and see Kiran's children and the way that they evaluate themselves, marks are one very small part of the evaluation. They are looking at all dimensions of themselves. I remember once visiting the school and a little third grader came and showed me her resume. And I said, "You have a resume?" And she said, "Yes, we keep adding all the dimensions of ourselves to our resume, you know." And the child could articulate like all the qualities that were good about her, all the things she wanted to work on, all the opportunities she'd been a part of. So I think when we change what we measure, we change our actions, and that is the starting point. I think whatever we can do together to lobby for that, let's really advocate for that.
That is wonderful. I would like to add on a little more to that question, please. How do you communicate this vision to the parents who are the biggest stakeholders, I would say, other than the children themselves? How do you communicate this vision to the parents?
Yeah, I mean, what we found is that it just takes really authentic and strong relationships. So for teachers to know that they're not just teachers in the classroom, but they're a part of that child's whole life. So our Teach for India fellows spend a lot of time in the community, connecting with parents, celebrating festivals with them, building the relationship of trust that it takes to start to shift slowly over time some of these ideas. Because it's really tough for parents. Like even for me, like I have 2 students, I believe in all of these ideas, but I know at the end of the day that for my child to get into college is a very, very important thing. And she's going to need those grades, and I do push her on the grades. So there are huge pressures against us, but I think slowly through dialogue, through bringing parents in as partners, we can start to shift things sometimes over time.
If I may just add a word to this, Shaheen, this is exactly the reason why we have 2 verticals to the Global Tipping Point Summit. We have education and parents, and we are encouraging parents to attend the education summit and vice versa, because we want them to get into a genuine dialogue. That is one of the aims of this summit as well.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know why I feel very stupid that at Teach for India, like we've always known that parents are a very important part of the equation, but I think the pandemic has been a real opportunity to take that to the next level and say, like, it is about parents. Like ultimately, the teacher and the student have to work in absolute partnership through the process. And we've seen the most incredible things with kids learning at home, of how parents are getting engaged now, because we can't be teaching them without their parents involved.
And we, as teachers, I think we need to develop more sensitivity towards the parents, especially when they come from an income group which is very different from ours. I have been working in a school in Dharavi, and one day I got a message from there that the father had tied his kid to the fan. And obviously I was horrified. I ran to the scene to find out that there was so much of an emotional investment, and the poor man was saying, I'm suffering in life because I don't know English. I put him into an English school, but even after 3 months, this kid can't speak in English. So then one realized that the fault was probably ours. We didn't really understand the parents, and that was a sign of desperation. So I think this kind of deep understanding in the best interest of the child is what we really need to get engaged in.
Yeah, and Kumi, I would just add, like we found just the value of love to be the most powerful thing. You know, when we introduced love as a core value at Teach for India a few years ago, and everyone started laughing, walked out of the room. Like people were like, how can you? I mean, everyone has different connotations and interpretations of love, but really, I think it's been one of the most powerful things we've done, because when you learn to love first self, then the person around you, the environment you live in, the world, like just everything changes. And I ask myself often, like, what does it mean for teachers to love what they do? Like everything will change if they love their you know, they understand the importance and they love what they do.
If I may just add something here as well. During my teacher training programs, I often tell the teachers that love is not an emotion. It is your essence. You're made up of this actual chemical called love. And only when it turns sour do you act in negative ways. So can we really start functioning out of love? I have found the same kind of resistance. What is she talking about? Is she going to get into a Mills and Boone story? But no, then they gradually come to the idea that when you operate from love for children, love for what you're doing, you can't go wrong.
Yeah.
Any more questions, Devika?
There is one more question.
All right.
And, I'll just read out the question. I do observe that children in elite schools are aware of the need to be sensitive, but find it extremely difficult to give up the entitlement that they are born with. How can we develop that sensitivity?
I love this question.
Lovely, really.
I love this question because I think, I grew up with a lot of privilege outside of India. And from the age of 12, I was volunteering, and it changed my life. I was volunteering with children, and I was volunteering with animals. And I think my short answer is just exposure. Like, I remember in the early days of Akanksha, we had volunteers go into the community. And I remember one day a volunteer came back and said, I knew all the statistics. I knew about poverty. I knew about educational inequity. Now I know the names of children in the community, and everything's changed in my mind. I think if we can bring children together, they will learn so much from each other, so much. And what we found, because with our kids education revolution, this is exactly what we do. Like, we have kids from all different backgrounds come together in the spirit of reimagining education. And it's incredible how much the students benefit and learn from each other. So I would just say, in small ways, try to bring kids together. Don't overstructure it. Don't try to do too much. Just enable dialogue. Kids are beautiful themselves. They figure it out. They don't need a lot.
Absolutely.
I do agree, and I would like to share an incident. We send our children out to clean the beaches of Mumbai, and these are young children of grade 6, 7, and we have found often that when they go there, they get their hands dirty and they come back. There is a lot of inner dialogue that happens, a lot of reflection that happens, and they do learn a lot of valuable life lessons. So I do agree wholeheartedly that if we give them the opportunity to experience and reflect, I think they will figure out the answers themselves.
Yeah, and the insights, I'll tell you in a quick, incredible story. We went out to clean a road as well as part of a project. And there were 50% of us were adults, 50% of us were children. And everybody went out and everyone was feeling great. They took pictures of the dirty road before, the clean road afterwards. When we came back to debrief, a 10-year-old student from a low-income background said, I feel uncomfortable. So I said, why do you feel uncomfortable? Everyone's so excited. You all did so much. She said, when we lifted all the stuff up, did we realize that we dislocated the insects and the ants, that was their home? I mean, it's, and she went on to say, sometimes when we bring about a positive change in the short term, it can be a negative change for someone else in the longer term. I mean, so insightful. And really, this can happen at any level, right? An adult can learn from a student from an adult. Actually, what adults bring and what students bring is so complementary that together we're so much stronger. I keep thinking of it in that way. Like, we on average will never have the energy, the idealism, the sense of fun that a young person has, the ability to dream. We bring the experience, we bring the realism. Like, together we are so strong. And how do we think about that idea of partnership?
Any more questions? Devika, any more questions?
I'll just check. At the moment, we have a question about the education policy. And there is another one about how do we create the sensitivity in teachers about different mental range of students in classes. So I would rephrase that question and talk about the different abilities of learners in our classrooms. If you could just talk about that, please.
What I found is that helping teachers reflect through social experiments, through discussion, through not feeling embarrassed to share the biases that they have, it takes a lot of time, but slowly people shift. And so we are constantly doing different experiments. For the next 3 hours, go out on the roads, just meet a street child, sit down and talk to them for 3 hours and come back and debrief it. These kind of experiences shift you to think differently. Simulating inequity, simulating racism, getting people to talk about their own experience of feeling like someone discriminated against them, but really holding spaces where people feel not embarrassed to share the things really in their heart, but safe enough, and where people can listen to each other. One of our fellows started this incredible, very simple process called the Guftagu Circle, where every 2 weeks in the school, very different people would sit together in a circle. A community leader, HM, sweeper of the school, fourth standard student, and nobody would interact. One by one, they would just share their story. And you would see how the empathy built. Like when we listen to each other's stories at a deep level, we start shifting because that empathy builds.
Absolutely.
So I don't think it's easy, but I think it's possible. We're also right now developing a curriculum, which is a democracy curriculum, where we're enabling children and with them their teachers to really practice the ideals of our constitution. What does it mean as a third grader to practice liberty, to practice equality? It's all going to be open source. So the hope is that lots of different people use tools like that also to start building that sensitivity.
Thank you very much. I think, Kumi, there is one last question. If we have...
Right. Yes, fine. If it's a quick question.
Yes, a quick one, please. I mentioned there's a question about the education policy. And the question is, what can we do as educationists to make a difference and bring about policy changes in education? And how to focus on life skills and skills in the field of education? So these are two questions. I've just combined those quickly. If you can answer those two, please.
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is, I think that there's a lot in the new education policy which is idealistic and directionally really progressive. The big questions are what's going to get implemented and how is it going to get implemented? I think if each one of us, based on our strengths, based on our interests, can choose a few things and work very closely with governments to roll those out, that's where we'll start seeing implementation actually happen. Can we work in partnership with government so that some of this actually becomes a reality? On the life skills, again, I'm a big believer in integration. I don't think the question is like academics or life skills, 21st century skills, or going to college. I think it's an and. I think they need to come together. All children need life skills, 21st century skills. All children need a really solid academic base. All kids need to read fluently, etc. How do we integrate these together? And I think lots of people in the country are doing exemplary work in this area. How do we learn from them, again, use their tools, and start these experiments in small ways on our own? I was writing a lesson plan today for the democracy curriculum on teaching young kids, kindergarten to grade 2, what does it mean to take a small step? And I think that's what I often tell myself, like some of these things like the NEP feels so overwhelming, so far away from where we are, but what's the small step I can take? And the small step will lead me to the next step.
Brilliant. Absolutely wonderful. Really.
So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Shaheen. Nina, would you take over? Nina? I would now want to invite Ms. Shalanta Mascarenas to propose the vote of thanks, please.
Good evening, everyone.
Yes,
Thank
Shalanta.
you, Ms. Shaheen Mistri, Ms. Kiran Bir Sethi, and Ms. Bachi Karkaria for your wonderful, thoughtful, and thought-provoking presentations and your responses during the Q&A sessions. You have certainly set the tone for our action-oriented Global Tipping Point Summit, which starts from tomorrow until January 2021. Since the summit is planned as an annual event, we also hope you will agree to continue associating with us. We extend our gratitude to all our participants who have joined us today from all over India and different countries of the world. Do also register for the Parenting Summit from the 8th to the 31st January 2021. Kindly note that these sessions have been especially scheduled for everyone's convenience only on the weekends, because we need you to work collaboratively with us to bring about the change we want to see in the world. Do also follow us on our social media handles. That is on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. See you tomorrow for the session from 4 to 5:30 p.m. on Digital Pedagogy for All by the Director, YouTube Content Partnerships in India, Mr. Satya Raghavan, and his wonderful team of change facilitators. Please also note that the meeting link that you have used today remains the same all through the Education Summit. Until then, thank you, stay safe, and be happy.
Thank you, everyone, and bye-bye.
Thank you.